Well, good afternoon. I want to thank the organizers and Sages so much for inviting me to give this talk. I have to say, part of the reason that I'm here is because I thought that this session was so intriguing. I just love the whole title of the session, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the panelists as well. So the title of this was hashtag TBT and hashtag back in my day. And you kind of know you're in trouble when the first thing you do is you have to Google what TBT is. As it turns out, it's Throwback Thursday. And I actually have a Twitter account, and so I went onto Twitter, and this actually is used, and not surprisingly, it's used more than just on Thursdays. And so it really, as you can see up there, it's really just kind of a throwback to is what the hashtag can refer to now. But I needed a little bit more information, so I went to Wikipedia, another great source of information. And you can see here that this really paints kind of a positive view, right? It's about nostalgia, and a lot of times it really is about positive nostalgia, because by definition, we like to remember when things were possibly better. But I would say we have to balance that with maybe when we just remember things fondly, and that sometimes memories aren't always great memories. And, you know, we can sit here, all of us, we have stories, because at the end of the day, that's what we have, and we have our own memories of how things were. And, you know, I think all of us could tell stories about our days in the trenches. Many of you in here are trainees, and so you can tell your stories about your last call night. And I don't think it does much good to kind of to brag about the days before the 80-hour work week when I trained, the days of Q2 call. I mean, I tell those stories because that's the life I lived, but that doesn't mean that those were better days. And in fact, I would say that those were kind of the bad old days. And I use stories a lot because I think that that is a way of gaining perspective, and that's a way of helping us understand the perspectives that we have from each other's paths and the paths that we take to get to where we are. So I can only give you my perspective on this, and that's as somebody who's solidly a Gen Xer and a view of the generation, so to speak. So I use Google, and so a lot of the years that define the generations are a bit approximate. But baby boomers, I think, are characteristically known as being firmly in charge for the past few decades. And you can imagine that that just is a symptom of age and time served. And baby boomers are classically characterized as those who really are kind of part of the organization. They really operate by the rules and believe that there is a way that things work. There's currently kind of a shift to Gen Xers, again, largely a symptom of age and time served in jobs. And Gen Xers are characterized as those who are really more likely to reject the status quo. Gen Xers are viewed as being a little bit more independent than baby boomers, but really value networking. And we don't really have the time to get into why these characteristics are in place. But I would be remiss to say that all of these characteristics are positive, because there are negative characterizations of all the generations, so to speak. And I think baby boomers really kind of get characterized as being too secure and being, valuing security too much, because they live this quote-unquote empty corporate life. And currently there's a lot of discussion about how baby boomers just aren't retiring, and they're kind of clinging on to their jobs and their positions. So that's kind of the negative characterization. Similarly, Generation Xers have been characterized as whiners or slackers. And I remember that characterization when I was a trainee. That was kind of lobbied at us across the operating room table. And I think, just given the name of this session, I have to cover the millennials as well. And I do think the positive characterizations of millennials is that there's a lot of living and working with purpose. And I think good and positive takes on the importance of work-life integration. But it doesn't come as a surprise to anybody in here that there are some negative characterizations of millennials, which is that millennials are entitled and very self-absorbed and have no loyalty. I will say, though, and this was not a systematic review of Google, but I think there's a lot out there. And I think that in many ways, we're all really much more alike than we are different. And this really kind of interesting bit of data, this is really the only bit of data that I'm going to show, is that across generations, there are very similar career goals and things that make people want to be at work and do a good job at work. And those things are pretty, you can just, I don't even need to read the data to you, those things are pretty similar across baby boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. So my takeaway from all of this is that really part of, I think, the purpose of this talk and the part of the purpose of giving this talk is to really realize that we are all in this together, we take care of the same patients, and that there are ways that we can all be better at work. And I've listed just 4 things. I think it's important to have a strong organizational mission, whether that be surgery writ large or the institutions that we're all currently working at. I think we all need the proper resources to do a good job. It's really important to work in an inclusive and respectful environment and to really have fulfilling and enjoyable work. I hope these points aren't contentious with any of us in here. I think they are easy to forget sometimes when we get busy, but I think these are the tenets that cross generations. So I think that one thing I can add to this conversation is my perspective on things, so my story, so to speak. So I'm a relatively chronologically young department chair, and some of my friends in business gave me this article from the Harvard Business Review right before I started my current job. And it's kind of interesting because this isn't sort of how you manage younger employees. This is an article written to people who have a boss that's younger than they are. So I thought this was pretty interesting. And the tenets that were of advice that came from that were for the employees now, so reverse the chairs, if you will, is to show respect, remembering that at the end of the day, that person is still your boss. And to avoid stereotypes. And I think some of that is to avoid the stereotypes that are inherent in classifying generations. And again, remember, we're all more alike than we are different. And I think importantly, in sort of a level hierarchy at work is to aim to be a partner and not necessarily view it as such a hierarchy. I think in medicine, and particularly in surgery, we have had a hierarchy and view a hierarchy forever. And I think that now's the time to really level that playing field. And I think in working as a team, it's really important to work together and to provide important information for the entire team to do a good job. So again, leveling the hierarchy and behaving like a team. So it was interesting to see the other side of it. I did take this article to heart when my friend gave it to me before I started my new job. And I've been in my position for a little bit more than 3 years now, and I think I probably have 2 bits of advice in terms of managing the hierarchy, if you will. The first is, especially if you're in a position of managing across generations, is to be confident in your role. And I think that when you don't have a lot of gray hair, when you have a little bit of gray hair, and you definitely don't have those old war stories. You have some, but you don't have the magnitude. And a lot of that is time served. But I will say that I don't necessarily think that time served is equivalent to experience. There's no getting around the fact that there is some association, but I think we all take our experiences from different things that we do. And that's just part of lifelong learning. And I would say start with a position of conviction that goes part and parcel with being confident. And I'll close by saying that balance confidence with being open-minded, and it's important, again, to share openly across the team and to gather confirmatory evidence for anything you're willing to do and want to do as a leader. So I'm over time a little bit. I look forward to the discussion later. Thank you very much.